Welcome to the Mile High Flight Show, where a Jets fan and a Broncos fan get together to talk about the NFL and other sports. I'm your host, Ryan Marinholtz, alongside Enrique Cisneros. Let's get into this. I'm so stoked to get into this, Enrique. We have a ton to talk about, both in the NFL as well as the UFC, with the card coming up here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, buddy. It's nice to hear from you. And yeah, I mean, I'm super stoked for one. I'm super stoked for this time of the year. Two, I'm super stoked for this show because we're finally start getting into some of that draft stuff in the NFL. I know we had a long month with all the free agency news, and yeah, I mean now we'll start getting into all that draft stuff and start looking at all the different team needs and different team fits for all these young guys coming out of college.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's an exciting time to be an NFL fan. Just got over all those free agent moves, still some coming in here, and just, trickling in before and after the draft, and finally starting to kind of see what the teams are going to look like next year. And there's a lot of, tectonic plates in the league moving around, and a lot of big players changing teams this year. So it'll be fun. So a few more moves that have been coming in that we can talk about real quick. Xavier Howard of the Dolphins, he agrees to a 5-year extension that is worth $50.69 million, including, so it's an extension that is worth another 5 years, but he already had, I believe it was 3 years and like 30 on his contract. And so the full total of the new contract and new money and everything is going to be around 5 years and 90 for him. So
Nice.
very nice contract for him there. We were talking about this a little off the air, but we thought that he was gone and he was going to move to another team, and eventually they were able to work something out here.
Yeah, and good for Mr. Howard because Xavier Howard has been one of the premier shutdown corners in the league for a long time now, and I mean that's coming from an AFC East rival, and I don't tend to pick on the Dolphins too much because I mean they're usually in the bottom of the barrel along with the Jets, but Xavier Howard has been a premier corner for a long time, and I know that he was real disgruntled with the way he was being handled and the way his contract was being handled. So I'm glad to see him get some more money. I'm glad to see them throw a few more years onto that deal for him. And I mean, 5 years, 90 mil. That's a pretty good deal for the type of corner that he is. Plus, I mean, I think the last 3 years he's had double-digit interceptions, maybe minus a year or two, but yeah, I mean, dude's a stud, and he's gonna continue to lock down that secondary for a very promising Miami team. That the more and more you start looking at the Miami Dolphins, the more and more you're like, okay, where do these guys fit in this AFC picture?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're an interesting team to watch. Got a lot of talent. Just added Tyreek Hill, of course, at the cost of a lot of draft picks and a lot of cap space. But they've got some interesting going on. A brand new head coach, Mike McDaniels, as well. Interesting to see how he's going to work out. I think he's a really smart guy. But uh, when the more I see McDaniels, I kind of think, well, maybe it's because they have the same last name, but I think of the Broncos and Josh McDaniels back in like 2011, where very smart football mind. I'm waiting to see when it comes to Mike McDaniels whether or not he's going to have like that personal side of being a head coach that Josh McDaniels didn't, and was such a big reason of why he flamed out in his first tenure as a head coach with the Denver Broncos, and now he's getting another chance with the Raiders. Uh, but it'll be interesting to see how Mike McDaniels can lead that talented team, and if they can turn that roster into some playoff wins here in a very talented AFC, like you said. So to move on, legendary safety Malcolm Jenkins retiring after a 13-year-long career between the Eagles and the Saints. Very, very nice player. Just a consistent force throughout his career. I might have to look back at it, but I feel like he was just never injured, not all that often, and he was just always there in the league doing his thing, and finally calls it quits.
Yeah, shout out Malcolm Jenkins for sure. Just yeah, like you said, very consistent safety. Just very, very consistent high play throughout his whole career. And I think he was on that Eagles team that went and got a bowl too, maybe.
Yeah, I believe so.
So got that ring, and yeah, I mean it's especially nice to see guys retire when they want to and not have the game retire them. So yeah, shout out to Malcolm Jenkins for sure, legendary career, and he's definitely going to be one of those guys that people look back and say like, yo, Malcolm Jenkins was nice. So yeah, shout out to him. Wish him the best in retirement.
Absolutely. I love that point you bring up of not letting the game retire them, but retiring on their own terms. And it's something you don't necessarily see all that often in the NFL. But for like legendary players like that, it's pretty cool when they get to kind of not necessarily walk off on the sun in the sunset, but as close as you can get to it. So another large figure in the NFL retiring, Bruce Arians, well, retiring from head coaching at least. He's going to be moving over into a front office role for the Buccaneers and letting Todd Bowles take over the reins for the Bucs. And an interesting note on this was Bruce actually came out and said, probably to quell some of the storylines that were already coming up in the media, was part of the reason why he made the decision was in fact because Tom Brady came back, but not for the reason that people are trying to make it out to be, like they have some beef. It sounds like that if a long time wish of his, Bruce's, was to be able to retire and leave a team that was going to have a high chance of success to whoever he was going to leave the team to. And so, good for him if that's actually what it was, or, it seems like it. It's a cool story, but just letting Todd Bowles finally take over. You wonder if that's part of the reason why he didn't get a head coaching gig this past cycle as well, is because maybe Bruce Arians was like, hey, some things could happen, and that he's in a really good spot to be a second time head coach. I believe Todd Bowles is now, after being
Yeah.
with the Jets. And yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so first I love the move for Todd Bowles. I've always loved Todd Bowles. I loved him when the Jets hired him. Unfortunately, I didn't think he got the fairest shake just because I mean, we had John Isdick back then as our GM, and to say the least, John Isdick wasn't very good GM. None of the draft picks that he picked panned out. I thought Todd Bowles did a lot with a little bit of talent that we had at the time.
Mhm.
And so when he went down to Tampa and, he won a bowl and, he was surrounded by all this talent, and especially him getting the credit being the defensive coordinator. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. Loved it. And I thought it was really cool. I think it's kind of weird. I think it's a weird move from Bruce Arians for sure. I wasn't like, this is one of the more unexpected moves.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's very interesting, especially with all the rumors and stuff that were coming out, that this is the way he decided to move. But yeah, I mean, no harm, no foul. And I don't think Brady would have went back to the Buccaneers if he actually had a problem with Todd Bowles. I think
Right.
that especially with how he retired and then came back, I think if he was going to do that, he's doing it, because he has full faith in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And yeah, I'm sure Todd Bowles is going to just carry on where he's been.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like it. And very excited to see that. I'm sure they'll probably just hit the ground running. Bruce Arians being in a role too within the building where I believe the title is like head football consultant or something like that. So he's, still going to be there to be able to pass some pointers along. And as he left in his retirement note, be available to cuss out players when they do things wrong on the practice field, which is very Bruce Arians. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. So to move on, another big story here. The NFL owners have voted to 29-3 to change the playoff overtime rules, now giving both teams a chance to possess the ball. How do you feel about that, Enrique?
I think it's interesting. Now tell me what is the biggest difference coming from the old overtime rules? Because I thought the old overtime rules that we just changed were pretty much first team to get a touchdown wins. So I know if the team that first had got the ball goes down and kicks a field goal, then the opposing team has the opportunity to score a touchdown and win the game. So now is it both teams that score? Both teams have the opportunity to score a touchdown. Is that how it sounds, or am I um am I botching it?
I'm kind of waiting because I haven't seen them like release super specific details on exactly how that's going to play out. But my understanding of it right now is that basically it's going to be like it was before, where you have the coin toss. Whoever wins gets to choose. They're probably going to choose to receive the ball anyways. And then, regardless of what the first team scores, whether that's a touchdown plus 2 points, they miss the 2 points, or they just get like a field goal or whatever. The other team now has an opportunity to either match or beat that. So, say if the first team goes for 2 and doesn't get it, so they have 6 points, the other team can go down and win it with 7. But you can also have a game where the first team does get 2 point conversion, makes it a 8 point game, and then the other team gets a touchdown, doesn't get the 8 point or the 2 point conversion, and game's over then. But for me personally, I feel like I didn't have an issue with the previous rules. I felt like the differential was kind of overblown. I understand the point with the super elite quarterbacks that we have now, but at the same time, by leaning into rules like this, in my opinion, the league is only moving further towards an offensive centered league that just leaves defense in the dust. The OT rules prior were one of those few things that were kind of skewed towards making you have to have a strong defense, because if only the team that gets the coin toss, if they have a good quarterback and you feel like they're going to score on the first drive and end it right there, you have to rely on your defense. And at this point, you can rely on the fact that in the playoffs, your quarterback and your offense is at least going to have a chance, as long as you can tie it in the first place, to go down and score it. So there's certainly positives and negatives. It doesn't bother me that much, and I don't think it's like a negative change for the game necessarily. But um, you know, you would like to see a little bit more balance with the defense in the league, with that's already moving offensively.
Right, and I definitely agree. I think this rule is probably going to be known as probably like the Josh Allen rule, because that's what I really
Right.
feel like this came from.
Yeah.
And I definitely agree with your point on it making it centered around the offense. Because yeah, I mean, I hated the old overtime rules where pretty much a field goal would win you the game.
Yeah.
I hated that. I hated
Yeah.
that. So I like the way they switched it up, especially adding like, the touchdown is the thing that wins the game, because a touchdown is harder to come by than a field goal. And I think it's definitely taken away from the attention of the defensive guys, and I feel bad because I mean the defensive side of the ball is one of my favorites for sure. Even
Yeah.
sometimes more than offense, because I mean, just like they say all the time, defense wins championships. I mean, that's how the Broncos won their last Super Bowl. Against Cam
Yeah.
Newton and the Panthers, was
Yeah.
their defense went out there and played lights out. And
Yeah.
when you start adding rules to change that, it definitely skews it a bit. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, the NFL, the next time they have a problem, they'll change it again. So
Right.
we'll see how this one will. We'll see how long this overtime rule lasts.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You make good points in there. And like you said, we'll see how long it lasts, because uh, nothing lasts forever in the league. And a lot of people like to say the league is cyclical. That's an interesting word, where, things will go around, and one part of the decade, the league will be very centered around, defense and the run game. And then 5 or 6 years later, you look and it's a passing dominated league, and all the defenses are just playing a lot of, like they are now, playing a lot of nickel and dime packages and have a lot of corners out there. And it's not as much about the bruisers and the offensive and defensive lines as much. And that just goes around in a cycle. So we'll see how long it lasts. Fun little note before we move on the playoff OT rules. Speaking of the fact of them only lasting so many years, when the previous overtime rules were first in play was 2011 in the Tim Tebow Bronco year. And the first game that those rules were used was the Broncos versus the Steelers, where Tim Tebow threw a first play overtime pass to Demaryius Thomas. It was like 75 yards to win the game.
Yep.
Legendary play.
Yep.
Yeah. Legendary play, legendary player. Rest in peace, Demaryius Thomas. Crazy moment, and just had to throw that in there.
No, absolutely. That is, not being a Broncos fan, but being from Denver, I remember the Tim Tebow era, and I'll say that, like I said, not a Broncos fan at all, but the Tim Tebow era in Denver, Colorado was the most exciting time ever. It was so crazy. And to cap it off with that slant that went to DT, like you said, RIP 88. Yeah, I mean, just an iconic moment in Denver football, and an iconic moment for Demaryius Thomas, and one that Tim Tebow shared when we found out about the tragic passing of Demaryius Thomas. That was one of the moments that Tebow brought up on his own. So, yeah, that's a nice way to end that overtime segment for sure.
Absolutely. All right. And then a couple more moves here. The Jets signing Solomon Thomas to a 1-year deal. Solomon Thomas, a player that, first round pick, I want to say 2017, but I might be wrong on that. He has not lived up to all of the expectations, but he got drafted by the 49ers, played a good few years there, was part of their 2018 run, and then got shipped over to the Raiders and has put a little bit of life back in his career, and it's started to get better. Signing with the Jets now, and it's an exciting move for me. I want dude to succeed, and I'm interested in your opinion on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely get into some of the Solomon Thomas stuff a little bit later when we break down the Jets a little bit. But yeah,
Absolutely.
I love the signing for the Jets because I love taking that second chance on guys that were picked really high. And if I'm being honest with you, not only did you get it correct on the year that he got drafted and the team he got drafted by, but he was drafted 3rd overall, so you have to understand that there was definitely an amount of talent that got him drafted at that spot. And even more so, I'm excited to just put him in that rotation with Quinnen Williams and John Franklin Myers, and we're getting Carl Lawson back. So just to have these, this rotation of talent, I love to see it. I love when the Jets do things that make sense,
Absolutely. Yeah, Carl Lawson is a name that I almost forgot was there, but that's exciting that he'll be back. And you love to have that, depth that you can rotate around, especially on that defensive line. That's something that the Bills have been doing a lot recently, is making sure they have all that depth. They can move around and stay fresh throughout the game, and in such an important position group as well. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that in the Jets section later on, but just to touch on that for a second here. And then one more move before we start getting into some of our pre-draft stuff is the Devontae Parker. Has actually happened just a couple hours before we got on air here. Devontae Parker traded from the Dolphins to the Patriots, and the Patriots receiving a 3rd round pick. Dolphins also sending over a 5th with Devontae. And it's an interesting trade. Devontae Parker is a player that, has not had the best luck in terms of surrounding cast for his career. You can kind of liken him to an Allen Robinson in that sense. But I don't know that he's had the production nor the availability because of injury to necessarily be put in that class of receiver. But I do think that going to the Patriots could be an interesting move for him. He's clearly their best wide receiver on the roster now. And Mac Jones is, he's accurate. He'll get him the ball. So it's up to Devontae Parker now, and we'll see how that works out for him.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Devontae Parker. I'm obviously not a big fan of him now, though, because he's going to the
Yeah,
Patriots. But yeah, I mean, best of luck to him. I do agree with you. I do think that the Patriots are going to give him that foundation that he needs, as far as professionally. And then the other part is on him because, I think some of that stuff down in Miami partially was him not being available. And then I just felt like there was times in Miami that honestly could have just played better. But, it the fact that the Dolphins were able to get a third round pick for Devontae Parker, I think that's pretty fair because honestly, I probably wouldn't have gave up more than a fourth or a fifth for him, just based on his production. I mean, I think that he's had flashes for sure, and yeah, the fact that the Dolphins were able to get at least some of those picks back from the Tyreek Hill trade. But I kind of link this in that same category of like when the Rams traded Robert Woods. If we can keep Devontae Parker with Tua, with Jalen Waddle, and Tyreek Hill, why not keep Devontae Parker? And
right.
I get, obviously Mike McDaniels is the one that's going to be playing with the offense a little bit, and maybe Devontae didn't have a clear role. Maybe that I
Right.
mean, like you said, he automatically becomes the Patriots' number one receiver. So, it's definitely a good career move for Devontae. But yeah, I mean, if you're Miami, I felt like if you could have kept him, why not keep him? You just never know with injuries and stuff.
Yeah.
At least that's my opinion on it.
Absolutely. I'm with you there. We talked a little bit about that with the Rams last week. And it's like, in this league where it feels like you have a player or two go down every week, it's just attrition sometimes. That's depth is never a bad thing to have, especially when it's your depth is a Devontae Parker. But you'll never hurt getting a third round pick back for him either. So, all right. So, I guess we can go ahead and move on to some of our pre-draft stuff. For our show today, we're going to go ahead and cover 4 teams, Broncos and Jets, obviously. And then we both picked one other team to cover. So I'll let you go ahead and start off with your first team, Enrique.
Perfect. So the team that I picked, besides my New York Jets to start off with, I picked the Houston Texans. And the reason why I picked the Houston Texans was because I mean they have a ton of needs. They have a ton of draft picks now after the Deshaun Watson trade. But I mean, all right. So I got their picks right here. So round the 3rd overall pick and the 13th overall pick. That's from Cleveland for Deshaun Watson. Round 2, they have the 37th overall pick. Round 3, they have 68 and 80. Round 4, they have the 107th pick that they got from Cleveland. Round 5, no picks. They have 3 picks in round 6 and 1 pick in round 7. So the first thing that I see from the Houston Texans, obviously they got the new head coach, and I love Lovie Smith. I think that he's going to be able to bring a foundation in that the Houston Texans need very, very badly, especially after losing. I mean, they've lost all the faces of their franchise the last couple of years. They lost J.J. Watt. Deshaun Watson requested a trade. And, I mean, the Deshaun Watson drama lasted a year and a half, 2 years already. And now they have to start over at quarterback. I mean, they had a franchise quarterback. They paid him a lot of money. Now he's with the Browns. Is Davy Mills the answer? From a 3rd round pick last year, played pretty decent. I'm not going to lie. He definitely played better than I thought he was. I thought the Texans were going to have literally win no games last year. So the
Yeah.
fact that they were able to pick up a few wins, obviously they're picking 3rd overall for a reason. But it seems like right now they're comfortable with going with Davis Mills as their quarterback, at least for the interim. And I agree with that. I don't think that I think that they have so many holes on their roster right now. Investing a big pick or a top pick in a quarterback, I just don't think is a smart move. I think that there's
Yeah.
a bit of an unknown factor with Davis Mills. Let's give him another year. I think the biggest kind of stuff they need, because when you have a bad football team, you could pretty much just spin the wheel and whatever position it comes up, you just take that guy. I think offensive line, because you want to build kind of, at least in my opinion, and obviously I'm a little biased because my general manager Joe Douglas believes in the same philosophy, but you got to build from the trenches. You got to
Yeah.
build a solid foundation to protect your quarterback. They have Laramie Tunsil, if they decide to keep him, which I don't know if Lovey Smith listens to our show, but I definitely implore him to keep Laramie Tunsil. They gave up a lot of picks for him beforehand, and so they have a starting left tackle. Let's just hang on to him. Brandon Cooks as well. Let's just hang on to him, because I know there have been some talks about Brandon Cooks possibly getting traded, and that still could happen. But I think at least in the first round, we need to look. Especially at the third overall pick, we need to look at the offensive line. So we could see like an Evan Neal. We have, I forget how to pronounce his name, Icky. And his last name's super, super hard. I think he
Oh,
plays
I know who you're
at
talking
Tampa.
about. I struggle with his
Yeah,
name. I
yeah,
think it's like Ike Okonwu or something along those lines.
yeah, exactly. But he's, between him and Evan Neal, it's a pretty much toss up. But I think Evan Neal has slightly better pass protection than Icky does. I think Icky's much better in the run game than Evan Neal might be. And then at 13, I think that's when it gets a little dicey, right? Because you're either going to have someone that fell out of the top 5, top 10, that could be very, if a Kyle Hamilton falls to 13, that could be very intriguing.
Yeah.
Um, because besides Deshaun Watson, the other big loss for the Texans was losing Justin Reed. Justin
Yeah.
Reed was a big one. And because Justin Reed was has been one of my favorite safeties for a long time. And I
Yeah.
thought that he's been super underrated down there in Houston. And for whatever reason, JJ Watt, Deshaun Watson, Justin Reed, they didn't want to play in Houston anymore, and they got out of there. And now the Chiefs got Justin Reed. So I think when you have such a bad team, you can pretty much go any which way. They have a lot of draft capital in the first, four rounds. I'm not really too worried about them sixes and the seventh rounds. I think they're probably package those to get to move up, kind of mess around. The other thing that I've been kind of hearing too is, what if Houston just trades down from 3 to try to pick up some more picks? I don't think that's outside the realm, especially if it's just 1 or 2 picks down. They still feel like they can get the guy that they were going to get at 3. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think Houston definitely has some big moves. And the other thing that I wanted to ask you is, realistically, what is the ceiling for the Houston Texans after this draft class next year? What are we thinking that the Lovey Smith is going to be able to do with a really a bare cupboard? I mean, unless
Yeah.
they would really have to kill this draft to make me feel any better about their roster, because their roster, I think they're starting running backs Rex Burkhead. Well, they just signed Marlon Mack. They got Deshaun Hamilton from the Broncos. And I love Deshaun Hamilton, actually. I that was one of the guys I kind of wanted the Broncos to hang on to. I didn't
Yeah.
feel like he got enough, but you guys got a crazy wide receiver room, so I do get it. But yeah, I mean, it just looks pretty rough. So what do you think about the Houston Texans? Where do you think they're going to go next year as far as how many wins? What do you think that ceiling looks like?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. I think it all comes down to, like you were talking about earlier, with Davis Mills and what he can do coming into his second year. And he definitely showed some flashes last year. He definitely showed growth throughout the year and played his best football in the end of the year, which is always a promising thing, especially when you have that little of a roster there. You still had Davey Culley as the coach, so you never know what changing that up is going to do. But they're only going up in terms of talent. And like you said, they have so many draft picks now, but also so many options of what they could do. And they're at a point with their roster where they've just got this gigantic contract off the books with Deshaun Watson. They might still have some dead money. I'm not positive on that, but at least for like this year or whatever. But they're, getting to the point where they're kind of opening back up and they can fully just go all in on a rebuild. So it might be a situation where they want to trade back and then collect some picks. And you don't even, like you said, you don't even have to trade out of the top 10, collect a second and a third, and that's good business right there. Get some really talented players to fill some of those holes on your roster at the moment and start putting together a core. After losing those guys, when you thought you had maybe something a little promising, they got to the divisional game in
Right.
2019 or whatever it was against the Chiefs, and almost beat them until they just completely choked it. But yeah, so interesting times down in Houston, and it'll be interesting to see what Davis Mills can do, and what he can lead that Texans team to. For wins, I honestly, like, for this next year, I have a hard time seeing them get above 5. But other than Matt Ryan and the Colts, and if Ryan Tannehill and the Titans can kind of get back to full strength, it's not like the most closed up division in the world either. You still have Trevor Lawrence and the fledgling Jaguars over there, so they have some room to do some damage. It'll be interesting for sure.
Yeah, I think the Deshaun Watson thing is really, when Deshaun was on the Texans, honestly, I was cool with calling the Texans like a random, maybe borderline playoff team, just because I believe in Deshaun Watson as a quarterback. I think he's that
Yeah.
talented that even with the bear cupboard that he had, I felt like he probably still could have pulled out 9-10 wins, maybe fought for a wild card. But I'm going to have to agree with you. I think that this team is going to be very bad next year. And I have a lot of friends that are Texans fans, so I do feel bad saying that. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be. I think that they're going to be 4th place in that division for sure. And that's with Jacksonville. I think that Jacksonville, besides overpaying Christian Kirk, I think that they've made promising moves, and Trevor Lawrence can only get better, especially with bringing back his college running back, that tore his ACL last year. He's getting him back.
Oh
So
yeah.
just like just like with the Jets getting Carl Lawson back, that's almost like a brand new pick in itself, because we didn't get to see anything of him at the NFL level. So yeah, I do think it's going to be a rough time. But yeah, I definitely see the Texans going offensive line somewhere, whether it's a guard or a tackle at 3, if they don't trade down. Even if they trade down, I think they still stay in the top 7. If they do, still in that offensive line kind of pick. And then at 13, if Kyle Hamilton's there, I think that's where they go. I think they have to add a blue chip player on both sides of the ball, defense and offense. Because I mean, honestly, besides Marlon Mack and Deshaun Hamilton, there really wasn't anyone they signed that was out of the ordinary. I looked at all of their transactions the last few days, and going back to the beginning of free agency, and they brought back some of their own guys on 1-2-year deals, some fringe starters / backup guys, but otherwise they really haven't made any splash plays. I think another thing that I would look for the Texans to do in the 2nd or the 3rd round is to try to solidify their secondary a little bit, at least in the cornerback spot, because I think Desmond King the second is going to be their starting corner. And I don't know how that's going to work out playing the quarterbacks they have to play in that division. So
Yeah,
I
that's
would
true.
I would definitely look for them to fortify that secondary a bit, starting with the safety in the 1st round, and then hopefully. I mean, this draft is loaded with corners. I think you get a really good corner, up into the 3rd round almost. So we'll just have to see how it plays out. But I am a big believer in Lovie Smith. I do think I totally forgot that Lovie Smith is the head coach in Houston. I
Yeah.
literally had to look up, because I know that Homeboy got fired And I mean, they
David
set him
Coley.
up. Yeah, I'm not sure why they did that to that poor guy. I feel so bad for him.
Yeah.
I feel so bad for him. He just literally, they're like, we got to put something out there this year. Best of luck to you.
Yeah.
And yeah, especially with all the Deshaun stuff that was happening, like, yeah, that dude really, he literally had to go do all those shitty press conferences, and then they fire him after that. Like,
Oh
it
man.
was terrible. It
Yeah.
was really rough. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it for Houston on for me. I'm looking forward to. I'm not sure which team I'm going to pick next week, but it's probably gonna be someone with a lot of draft picks because it was really fun looking into Houston because I was looking at their all their messaging boards like from their little fans or whatever, and yeah, they're they're pretty much clamoring for anything and anything. Any sort of talent to be injected into this team, I think, is going to be a good thing for Houston. So
Yeah.
I guess we'll just see. And they pick right before the Jets, so I'm a little bit more invested too because depending on where they go is where we're gonna go.
Right. You're right. Yeah. Now they're definitely an interesting team to watch for sure. And now that Deshaun Watson trades over with, their arrow is only pointing up. You know, you talk about all those picks they have, and uh, yeah, that they'll be fun to watch. Maybe not necessarily this next year, but it'll be fun to watch, see how they start to build and add talent to that roster. And it's almost like a reset, to be honest with you. And so yeah. So let's go ahead and move on. My first team here, a team that we did not cover when we talked about the AFC West, kind of neglected them just a little bit. The Los Angeles Chargers. So very interesting things going down there in LA. Obviously, you just have the Rams winning a Super Bowl, kind of cementing themselves as the leaders in the Battle of LA, if that's what you want to call it. But the Chargers still have a very talented team and a potential, force, not even potential, a force in the NFL in Justin Herbert. Going toe to toe in Patrick Mahomes in his very first game as a starter. I mean, what other way to make an entrance, right? So it's like it all starts with that. And then you have their head coach had his rookie year last year, Brandon Staley. Dude just speaks gold. Gold falls out of his mouth every time he talks. Haven't found a quote from him that I dislike yet. So they've gotten some interesting things to look at coming into this draft. Their biggest weaknesses last year that really just tore them apart and drove that playoff run down a cliff was their run defense first and foremost, coming from both their inside defensive line and their linebackers. It just wasn't enough. They just were never able to stop. You look at those final plays of the Chargers and Raiders game. In overtime, the Raiders have the ball. They're slowly moving past the 50-yard line. And the very last play to set up the field goal to win it was a run that they just couldn't get tackles on. And a play where they could have gotten them behind the line of scrimmage, but their players just couldn't get it done. So, that's their biggest thing that they need to fix this year. Another big thing is the lack of a speed threat on the offense. You did draft Jalen Guyton, I believe it was last year. And then you also had, or no, Jalen Guyton wasn't last year, but he is a speed threat on the roster. And then Josh Palmer was drafted a year previous, showed some flashes. They have some interesting guys in that wide receiver room other than Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, who Mike Williams just got an extension as well this offseason. But neither of those guys give you that take the top off speed. And that would really elevate, in my opinion, Justin Herbert's offense over there and give the other guys a little bit more space to work as well. And then the other thing that I would really say with them is just some running back depth behind Eckler. Eckler's a do-it-all guy. Really can't be mad with just having him as a workhorse in your offense. However, there's always a thing that he's a smaller guy, and you do start to see him tire a little bit when he's got those heavy workloads. And I think it would be very, very helpful for their offense to get a 1-2 punch going on with a draft pick, or maybe even a free agent that's still out there. As funny as it sounds, Melvin Gordon actually would be a really good fit as a 1-2 punch back with Eckler and the Chargers if he wanted to come on a cheap enough deal. But that is certainly a big need for them right now. So we can talk about some of their departures, but then also additions that have come in and filled some of those needs as well. So departures wise, you have tight end Jared Cook, played games for him last year, did good things, but also had way too many drops. Wasn't getting paid that much money, so you can't be too mad at it. Give you that veteran presence in the room, but it was time to move on. And then they lose right tackle Brian Bulaga. That leaves an open spot on their right tackle. So that becomes one of their biggest weaknesses and something that needs to be filled in the draft. Linval Joseph on the defensive line, Justin Jones on the defensive line, both guys that just weren't getting it done with the run. Positive moves, in my opinion, to let them walk and focus elsewhere. And then you lose linebacker Uchenna Nwosu, as well as linebacker Kaiser White to the Eagles. And again, both guys that just weren't getting it done for you. So, and then additions wise, a couple big players in Khalil Mack, obviously coming over from the Bears, helps out that, already stout, I should say, rush with the Watt brother. I keep wanting to say JJ, but it's not the Watt brother. Oh my gosh.
Bosa.
Bosa.
Joey Bosa. Yeah.
Thank you. My brain was not working for half a second there. I was like, it's one of the brothers in the NFL. Yeah, Joey Bosa helps out that edge attack there. That's going to be just ridiculous to have to face for opposing teams. Then they add cornerback J.C. Jackson, cements an already pretty good defensive back room. And then you start to fill in that defensive line. You get Sebastian Joseph Day as well as Austin Johnson. Starts to help with some of that run defense woes, but you still probably want to add one, at least in the draft there in that defensive line. To replace Jared Cook, they bring in Gerald Everett from the Seahawks. Not a bad pickup at all, but maybe a little bit underwhelming. And then the biggest pickup of their offseason, long snapper Josh Harris, biggest player. So definitely some big additions for them. Definitely started to fill in some of those needs. You look at the run defense there, fill in some of the defensive line, but you still need a right tackle. You still need some sort of speed threat on the offense, and you could still really use a running back. And they also, I missed him as well, they lost cornerback Chris Harris Jr., which was their slot. So you don't really have anybody filling that role at the moment either.
I didn't know they lost Chris Harris.
Yeah, I think he's still one of those players that he could end up signing back with them on a cheap deal, depending on where his market's at. But as of now, he's not re-signed with them. So,
wow, that's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah. And honestly, Chris Harris Jr. is one of those players that prior to the Broncos picking up Quan Williams, there's kind of a little campaign to bring him back on a cheap deal and fill our slot. But I'm sure he'll find a spot. There's always a spot for those veterans. They can still play a little bit of that all-important slot position. So the Chargers are coming into the draft with 10 picks, and their first two at 17 and then all the way at 79 in the third round. And they don't have a second rounder. They could trade back up with some of those 10 picks. That's the nice thing about having so many darts to throw at the board is you can do whatever you want. So if you want to get back into a very, very, very talented second round with some of those later round picks, you can certainly do that. Or you can trade back and collect even more. So we can go through their needs now, and then I'm just going to go ahead and suggest one or two players that I like from each position. It always depends on how the board falls, what they use their picks for and where they end up picking those positions at. But just throw some names out there. So for right tackle, I really like Charles Cross out of Mississippi State, as well as Trevor Penning out of Northern Iowa. Trevor Penning, one of those guys that's kind of been a media darling just because he's, very powerful, very run through your face, able to just throw a man. That kind of offensive tackle could be very, very good in the league. And then both of those guys, somebody that you won't necessarily have to be um, in the top 10 or top 15 to get necessarily for that right tackle spot, which is probably going to be, I wouldn't be surprised to see at least one or two tackles off of the board in the top 10 there. So, um, interesting guys there. For wide receiver, you look at Chris Olave, Jameson Williams at Alabama, and then Kyle Phillips out of UCLA. Chris Olave out of Ohio State, and then Jameson Williams. Those guys are both first round guys. If you're going for them, that's going to be your top pick. You may even have to trade up from 17. But both guys that are going to transform that offense and really give Justin Herbert the weapons that he needs to just tear it up. I mean, he's already tearing it up, but I think giving him a threat that takes the safeties off and takes the top off the defense and just gives, the guys that you're paying $20 million a year to, and Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, even more space to work with and even more yard after catch room. Nothing but good things can come from that. So, and then Kyle Phillips is a slot guy that maybe you could sneak in and get in the second or third round. Really interesting player, got a lot of speed. And yeah, any of those guys would be nice in a really talented wide receiver class. For right guard, you have a couple guys, Dylan Parham out of Memphis, and then Kenyon Green out of Texas A&M. Both of these guys had experience playing both guard and tackle. So those are also interesting options for them in some of the later rounds or mid rounds, like second, third, fourth. And thinking about players that could potentially fill your role or your hole in either right guard or right tackle. And then inside linebacker, two guys that I really like, Brian Asamoah out of Oklahoma and Chad Muma out of Wyoming. Asamoah gives you a lot of speed, a lot of energy, and just a really fun player to watch. Chad Muma, a little bit more size, a little more prototypical of a linebacker out of Wyoming. I believe he was a 4-year starter, so it has a lot of time under his belt. And yeah, both guys that you could plug and play and really help out that run defense. For tight end, you did add Gerald Everett. In my opinion, I think that's still a need because Gerald Everett is not really a first option, especially for a quarterback like Justin Herbert. You want to get him, if you can, an actual weapon. And that's where I think either Jelani Woods out of Virginia or, bear with me, Chig Okonkwo out of Maryland would really come in handy. Both of those guys athletic. Both of those guys play with a lot of energy. They can catch the ball. Okonkwo in particular blocks very, very well. And yeah, those guys would be great adds for that offense. And then on the inside defensive line, you did add Sebastian Joseph Day and Austin Johnson. So that shores up some of your worries. But you still would want to look for some sort of long-term solution. And I think that's something that could be had in the later rounds, especially in this draft that's very, very talented on the defensive line. A couple guys there that I like in Jordan Davis, going to be a higher round pick out of Georgia. Big defensive tackle, really just going to be that giant black hole right in the center of your defense that just eats up blocks and lets the linebackers do their work in the run game. And then Thomas Booker out of Stanford, a guy that's training or getting a lot of traction in draft circles. So he may not fall quite as far as, you cross your fingers for, but he's probably going to be in the second or third round. Super smart guy, knows the game of football. Really excited to see where he lands, but I think he's a really good fit for this Chargers team on that defensive line, sit behind Sebastian Joseph Day, on Austin Johnson, and he would be a force for sure if they let him develop and get in there. And then for running back depth, a couple guys I really like. Kenneth Walker, the third out of Michigan State. He's, again, probably going to be a high pick. I don't think that that's necessarily what they should use a high pick on. But when you watch Kenneth Walker the third, you kind of throw caution to the wind a little bit and you're like, dang, that's a good player. So, and Pierre
Right.
Strong Jr. could be had a little bit later out of South Dakota State or South Dakota State. He is a smaller back like Eckler. He's got speed, he's got elusiveness. And normally when you're looking for a 1-2 punch, when you look at Eckler, even though he is a do-it-all back and has a lot of that bruiser mentality to him, despite being a small guy, you would probably look at it and say, okay, we want a bruiser to complement his speed. But I do think that Pierre Strong Jr. is different enough from Eckler in the sense that he's just got a different level of speed and a different level of agility. And he's a lot more of an outside running back. And I think he would be a really good fit in that running back room with Eckler. So a lot of different needs for the Chargers, but really only a few things that they need to get filled up to make a serious run in a very competitive AFC West. They filled in a lot of what they needed to do with free agency, getting Sebastian Joseph Day, getting Austin Johnson, getting JC Jackson. That certainly softens the blow of some of the guys you saw leave. If they can get that right tackle spot shored up, maybe get a couple depth guys in the interior offensive line, and then pick up a couple more guys on that defensive line and like a linebacker, the Chargers are in good shape coming up here.
Yeah, dude, I agree. I think you hit it spot on. I would love Trevor Penning to go to the Chargers. I think Penning is super underrated. I think obviously through this the combine and Senior Bowls and stuff, his name has definitely risen for sure. Because I've seen tape on him and dude is just throwing guys around. Like, he is a monster. And the minute you said a speed threat, the first person I thought of was Jameson Williams. First person. And exactly what you said, giving Justin Herbert a guy that could take the top off. We talked about it when we covered the AFC West a little bit. I think the Chargers are a really dangerous team. I think they really can. Think they really can make a run, especially. I'm so proud of Justin Herbert because I've been a Justin Herbert guy since day one, since he was coming out of Oregon. I just had a good feeling about him. So love that Herbie is playing to my expectations. You give him a solid right tackle. You give him someone along the lines of Olave or Jameson Williams, and I think it's gonna be problems for the AFC West. And then combining Khalil Mack and Bosa is just, and then you put JC Jackson on the back end. And, just to your point, we were talking about this off the air, Brandon Staley said it himself, he tried to gear up that defense a little bit. So I think add in a Jordan Davis especially Jordan Davis, he is the inside defensive lineman that I think of when I think of a run stopper. Dude is enormous. So getting him to plug in the middle of that defensive line to help Derwin James and Bosa and Khalil Mack and JC Jackson. The LA Chargers very quickly might overtake that top spot in LA. They might even take the top spot in the AFC West, if I'm being honest with you.
Very possible.
A tough team. That's a tough team.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. It's a tough division, but the Chargers are up to the task. And you see too many people right now, I feel like, writing off the Chargers because, they're the Chargers and they always choke and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, if you watch the games last year, you know how good that Herbert was, and just like, he's putting Mahomes even to a test as far as, people are calling him the next GOAT. I mean, you look at some of the things Herbert has done, and people will say he hasn't made the playoffs yet. But I'm like, he hasn't had a defense, like even just a relatively okay defense. It's just been so awful, but the magic that he makes happen is crazy. So it'll be interesting to see what happens not only this next year, but the upcoming decade plus of football that the Los Angeles Chargers are going to get out of Justin Herbert. And the best time to build around him is right now. And they're certainly doing everything they can to go into that window as strong a roster as they can be. So I suppose we can go ahead and talk about the New York Jets.
Yes, perfect, awesome. Well, I appreciate the wonderful lead-in and the wonderful intro to the New York Jets. So, first and foremost, like we said, we were going to get into the Solomon Thomas thing a little bit, and I'll just hit on it real quick because I really did like this move from the Jets, especially seeing how, like we talked about, he was a top 3 pick in the 2017 draft, went to the San Francisco 49ers. He did tear his ACL out in 2018. And then he played last year with the Raiders. It was, like you said, is pretty much best year. He had 4.5 sacks for the Raiders last year on a nice defensive line with Max Crosby and all the other guys that Las Vegas has out there. Like we said, he's going to add a nice rotational piece on a young, hungry defensive line. And the biggest thing that I love about this is that he was under Robert Saleh for 4 years in San Francisco. 4 years, 4 seasons of his now head coach, watching him, seeing how he plays, seeing the good and the bad things about Solomon Thomas. And I think Robert Saleh is going to know exactly how to use this guy. I think Saleh is going to know when he needs to push him, when he doesn't need to push him. I saw in Solomon Thomas's press conference with the Jets, his introductory press conference with the Jets, that he talked about just that he believes in this coaching staff and he believes in what we're building here. And that's half the battle right there. When you get guys that believe in your coaching staff and believe in your head coach. And I don't know how many Robert Saleh press conferences you've seen, but I implore anybody to go out and watch a Robert Saleh press conference, because if there's ever a man that you want to play football for, it's Robert Saleh, because
Yeah.
he just knows how to talk to grown men. He knows how to treat these guys. He knows how to motivate them. And there's one thing from a New York Jets fan that watched every single game last year: we never stopped playing hard. We never stopped playing hard. And
Yeah.
that's, if you go back and look at the tape, I mean, there's a lot of losses for sure, but there's a lot of fight in that team, especially on the defensive side. And then after Solomon Thomas, I mean, like we said, we were just going to buckle down, start getting into draft mode. Joe Douglas had a press conference earlier this last week, talking about some of the things that he wants to see. And I think he was hinting at drafting an edge guy with our top pick, which the Jets have needed a truly dominant edge guy since Jonathan Abraham left. And I think that we'll finally be able to address that in this upcoming draft. Round 1, we got the 4th and 10th pick. We got that 10th pick from Seattle in the Jamal Adams trade, which shout out to Seattle for taking Jamal Adams. Round 2, we got the 35th and the 38th pick. Round 3, we have the 69th pick. Nice. Round 4, we have 111 and 117. And then round 5 to close out our draft, we have 146 and 163. So we have tons of great picks in the top half of the draft there. And I really do see the Jets taking an edge guy with that 4th overall pick, and that's going to be whoever pretty much drops. That's either going to be Aiden Hutchinson, which a lot of people are projecting him going to the Lions. That's going to be Kayvon Thibodeau. His last name is rough for me to say. From out of Oregon. We have him as an edge guy. And then, I mean, honestly, I think after that, we have to go wide receiver. So I would a couple of the guys that I like, Traylon Burks out of Arkansas. Love Traylon Burks, big body wide receiver with tons of speed. Also another guy that the Chargers could look to get as well, depending on where they have him on the board.
Yeah.
My personal favorite is Drake London, and then we have
Yeah.
Garrett Wilson as well. I love Garrett Wilson. I love Drake London. The only thing I have to kind of say about both those guys, Drake London and Garrett Wilson, Drake London has a little bit of a possible separation issue, but that could just be USC's offense, and it might get better as he gets to the NFL with his route running. And then Garrett Wilson is by far the best route runner of the top guys. He has the best body control. But the thing about Garrett Wilson that kind of worries me is he doesn't necessarily have a truly dominant physical trait that you see from these other guys. You know, Traylon Burks has this elite size and elite speed, and you know Garrett Wilson just doesn't necessarily have those things. But you know, you just have to. It depends on what kind of wide receiver you're looking for. Are you looking for this big dominant wide receiver, or are you looking for a guy that's going to for sure go out there and route some people up and catch the ball? I think Garrett Wilson is that guy for sure. It's kind of going to be depending on what Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh think that that's going to pair up best with Zach Wilson. I know the other thing that Joe talked about for sure was still the possibility of trading for a number one wide receiver. He's pretty much said like anybody that's there with the right price, we're willing to look into. Obviously, we just saw a swing and miss at Tyreek Hill. We talked about it last week. AJ Brown still is a possibility. The rumors still haven't died down, and I guess a big part of the rumors that are kind of keeping this noise going is because that draft class was loaded with studded wide receivers, and the wide receiver market just got reset by Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill. So a lot of these guys, you know, aren't necessarily going to be affordable anymore for some of these teams. So they're looking to possibly move some of these guys, and that's where I was confused because I didn't know why randomly AJ Brown rumors were happening, but now it's starting to make sense. So AJ Brown, still someone that could, you know, possibly become a Jet. DK Metcalf, I heard, is still off the boards, but they're still looking out just in case something last minute wants to happen. And the new one, Debo Samuel. I heard that the Jets are looking out at Debo
Oh
because
man.
Debo is also, yeah, and that's my personal favorite because Debo is just he's one of those offensive weapon type of guys.
Yeah.
He's just a ball player, man. You just put him out there and he just does the rest. So I'm really looking for some of those things. And then kind of getting out of the first round, I pretty much am hoping that the Jets kind of fill that safety role. You know, maybe another inside linebacker, like we talked about last week. A weak side linebacker would be real nice to pair alongside C.J. Mosley and Quincy Williams, Quinnen's brother. Um, but otherwise, I mean, I'm really excited to see how you know, because I know we still got some pro days coming up, and you know, obviously we have the draft here at the end of the month, so I'm really excited to see the last few details that kind of propel guys or drop them in this draft class. But yeah, I definitely think as far as our top picks, we'll definitely be looking at a wide receiver, an edge rusher. Hopefully, we'll get a linebacker. And then, yeah, if we could just get guys that can kind of come in and mesh with our last year's draft picks, well, and that's always the goal, right? We want guys to come in and kind of buy into the system and, you know, just mesh right in and play right in. But with, I mean, everyone is getting a whole year of experience. Our whole coaching staff was new last year, including a brand new head coach, Robert Saleh, coaching for the first time. You know, so he's going to have a whole year of experience. Everyone on the coaching staff, our offensive coordinator was a first-time offensive coordinator. You know, defensive coordinator, first-time defensive coordinator. Our tight ends coach coached was the head coach in the Senior Bowl this year, because the Jets were selected to coach the national team, I believe. And so we got firsthand look at a lot of these seniors that are coming out of the draft, um, including a lot of the tight ends, which I'm still down to take any of those tight ends. Trey McBride,
Yeah.
any of them. But obviously, our tight end room is a bit more solid than it was when we first started looking at this pre-draft for the Jets. So yeah, I think it's going to be a wide receiver. I think we're going to have to look at some edge guys, and I'm just hoping. If I'm being honest with you, I'm hoping Aiden Hutchinson somehow drops that far, but I'll be okay with whatever edge guy we get. Even Karloftis would be really nice at that spot too. So
Yeah.
I'm uh I'm kind of interested to see where Traylon Burks kind of falls, because I've um I have a I've seen a lot of guys be really high on him. I've seen guys be a little bit lower on him. But yeah, I think Drake London's probably my favorite wide receiver coming out this year. So I'm definitely hoping to be seeing his name called at number 10.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so many good players to pick from. I definitely like Karl Loftus for sure. He's one of my favorites. And one of the things that talking about the Jets stood out to me as well, talking about the Solomon Thomas signing and, his previous relationship with Robert Saleh with the 49ers. Yeah, if people had questions about Solomon Thomas and whether or not, you know, he, you should feel concerned about, I guess, his what he's going to give you based on the fact that he really hasn't lived up to the expectations. To me, that sounds like proof right there. Is you have the defensive coordinator of the team who drafted him, who shared the initial. I guess I don't want to call it disappointment, but just like him not living up to the expectations, and then you have Robert Saleh bringing him over to his new team in the Jets. To me, that screams, I believe in this guy. I believe that what he has can be salvaged. He's got the talent. He's on his way. He's been improving, his years in the league. So that's an exciting signing, hearing you talk about that. And really just Robert Saleh in general. Talk about with the Chargers and Brandon Staley, but Robert Saleh is one of those really exciting, new coaches in the league that are just getting their start, but I think are going to have really good long careers in this league. And I hope that Robert Saleh is the one to bring the Jets back into solid relevance. And that would be so much fun. He's such a passionate coach. And I feel like he just embodies the Jets and that hardworking mentality. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can't say enough. I mean, I've been a Jets fan since Herm Edwards was our head coach. So
Yeah.
I mean Herm. I've seen Eric Mangini. I've Rex, obviously. So I've been through it all, and I've never believed in a front office staff like I believe in Joe Douglas. I've never believed in a head coach more than I believe in Robert Saleh. So,
Yeah.
and I mean, I love to see brown people win. Robert Saleh is the
Yeah.
first Muslim American head coach in NFL. Love to see that. Love to see
We
him go
love to
back
see
home
it.
in New York. Love to see it. Love to see it. And I'm just hoping that we nail this draft out, and he gets some guys that he can work with, put his paws on, and develop them, and really, if we win more than 6 games this year, I'm partying like it's the Super Bowl. Like I was saying, I've seen from Herm Edwards to Eric Mangini to Rex Ryan, and where Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas have started their tenure with the New York Jets. They've given us a lot of promises, Jets fans, because not only are they leaders, but they have the experience to back it up. Joe Douglas was with Baltimore and with Philadelphia. Those are two, especially the Philly. I mean, Philly's still kind of doing their thing right now. They made the playoffs last year, and I think Philadelphia has 3 first-round picks this year themselves. So, Philadelphia and the Baltimore background for Joe Douglas are wonderful. He's got that ring with the Eagles as well. And then, yeah, Robert Saleh is he's a player's coach in all the good ways that maybe Rex Ryan wasn't. Rex Ryan was a player's coach in a lot of ways, and the players love to play for him. But sometimes he'd kind of get on the mic and do some crazy interview stuff and kind of make that bulletin board material, where Robert Saleh doesn't do that. Robert Saleh just kind of goes in and handles his work. And, our motto last year for the Jets from Robert Saleh himself was all gas, no brakes. And yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be the same motto going forward, as long as Robert Saleh is our head coach, because he really embodies that. He really gets out there and works. I mean, there's clips of Robert Saleh running the stadium stairs to work out, just like his guys do.
Nice.
So yeah, I love Robert Saleh. If I get a Robert Saleh jersey, I get a Robert Saleh jersey.
Right. No, me too. Me too. Okay, so I suppose that does it for the Jets, and they have a ton of stuff going on. They are, to me, I liken the Jets to the Lions right now. To be honest with you, they remind me of, well, the Lions, I would say, actually have less like upside at the moment roster wise, but in terms of them being a up and coming team with a relatively new head coach who you can tell just exudes energy, exudes love for the game, and exudes want to win. And I feel like are in the beginnings of building a winning culture in a culture that has previously not really had that, at least recently. And so, it's really interesting to see what's going on over there between Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh and the way that they're leading that franchise. And then Zach Wilson balling out, he's still young, but the more pieces that get fit around him, it's going to make his life easier and his growth easier. And he's only going to keep getting better. Like you mentioned, you like to see him getting better over the season as well as through a injury, coming back from an injury. I want to say it was like a knee sprain or something along those lines, right? Like an MCL sprain.
Yeah, it was an MCL sprain, and I think he missed 4 or 5 games. I want to say it was closer to 4. But yeah, I mean, Zach came back and did his thing. And just a quick note on Zach. One, this whole offseason, he's literally just been on Robert Saleh called it a tour. He's just been meeting with all of his guys and working out with them this whole offseason.
Oh,
Like
wow.
for like you just have to love that. Like
Yeah.
and Mark Sanchez did a similar thing. He had his Jets West camp where he brought everybody out to the USC's facilities, and he would run routes and throw the ball with his receivers down there in Southern California. But Zach Wilson going out to where his guys are and meeting up and throwing the ball. I mean, there's pictures of him and Braxton Berrios buddying up. I love everything that's happening with the Jets right now. I love it, and even more so next week. I'll probably dive a little bit more into some second day picks that I think that the Jets could make. But yeah, everything right now, as far as the Jets wise, is definitely looking up. And I agree with your point with the Lions, because yeah, Motor City Dan Campbell is the man for sure. I love
Yes.
Dan Campbell. I think the only difference about Dan Campbell, I almost even got offended when you said that we're close to the Lions, because I think we have so much
Yeah.
more talent than the Lions do.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I almost got offended, but I'll save it. I'll save being offended for later. Um, but the thing about the Lions and with Dan Campbell is I just I don't know, man. I just think Dan Campbell reminds me of that Rex Ryan mold a little bit more. And it's good in some places and it's bad in other places. The one thing I'll say about the Lions is that they did not stop fighting either. They
Yeah.
fought and they played for that man, literally in meaningless games. And they totally destroyed an awesome parlay that I had by beating the Arizona Cardinals in like week 10 last year. So
Oh, I
yeah,
remember that. Yeah.
dude,
No, yeah, I,
crushed
I
my
agree with
pencil.
you. And I think that that's kind of where I've been with Dan Campbell is like, you love to see the passion and you love to see that excitement for the game of football and wanting to go all in like that. But then sometimes it can kind of come off as almost cheesy in a sense if it's not backed up. And, you know, to your point, kind of with Rex Ryan, but like you said, throughout the season, the fact that they were not having a good season, because to your point, with that comparison, the Jets have just so much more talent than the Lions did, especially this past year. You know, they were scraping by on a Texans level roster out there with Jared Goff. And uh, to see the sheer just relief and excitement, like if you go back and look up their first win of the year against the Vikings, and the way that after throwing the game-winning touchdown, that Jared Goff just sprints over to Dan Campbell, and they just share like such a happy, passionate hug over getting their first win of the season. It was like week 12 or 13 or something like that, you know, and it's
Right.
like, those are the moments that like, even though, you know, it's kind of easy to chuckle a little bit and you're like, it's their first win in 13 games or whatever, they're not doing good. But to
Right.
see the passion with which their players are still playing at that point and how desperately they want to win, not only for themselves, but probably for him too. You know, it excites you to see. And I think that that energy, I see a lot of that in Robert Saleh, but Robert Saleh, like I never had a doubt with him. Like you were talking about kind of with that Rex Ryan comparison where like sometimes it comes off as cheesy, that energy. I never had a doubt with Robert Saleh. He just seems so genuine in the way that he comes off with that. And that he's just a guy that just like, you know, loves to grind his nose, loves to just put the work in, and loves to win, and loves all that. Yeah, I mean, there's no way to quantify it other than I never doubted him. But um, yeah, both very exciting coaches, very exciting teams. The Jets farther along in their building process than the Lions, certainly. But exciting times in the league for sure. And so I guess with that, we will go ahead and move on to the Denver Broncos. And so plenty of interesting things going on in Denver. Last couple years, we have really had a roster that you could look at and say it's a quarterback away, you know, a quarterback away from whether that's playoff contention for the first time in half a decade, whether that's actually competing for a Super Bowl in a division that was already stacked for the last couple of years, dealing with just Patrick Mahomes. And then you see the rise of Justin Herbert and Derek Carr and the Raiders kind of making a comeback and starting to compete more and more. And then adding a lot of talent this offseason here too as well. So an interesting division landscape. But the biggest weakness for the Broncos last year, obviously quarterback. And then biggest weakness, you look at getting pressure on the QB, and something that very much became apparent after the departure of Von Miller before the midseason trade deadline and this past last year. And, you know, at this point, you're looking at Bradley Chubb, and at the time we had Malik Reed. And then as we start to talk about our additions here, starting to shore up some of those issues. But the other biggest issue we faced last year, just like the Chargers, was our run defense. At times we could be semi-dominant, but and then at other times, especially when our inside linebacker depth, we lost Alexander Johnson and Josie Jewell, both of our starting inside linebackers, within, I think, the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season, both to pectoral tears. And so we were traded for Kenny Young over from the Rams, trying to shore up that position all throughout the season. But our run defense just took a huge hit from it. And then we dealt with some defensive line injuries as well. But, you know, huge issue there, something you want to get fixed up. This offseason, we start to look at some of the players that departed from the Broncos. You look at Drew Lock, Teddy Bridgewater, Melvin Gordon, Noah Fant, the tight end, Shelby Harris from the defensive line, Bryce Callahan, our starting slot cornerback, Kyle Fuller, who had come over from the Bears he had 1 year left on his deal. And then Kareem Jackson, our safety for the last couple of years, alongside Justin Simmons. But you start to look at some of the additions and some of those holes that we're starting to look at, and that also have been opened up by the departures, got filled a little bit. So obviously, first and foremost, Russell Wilson. We've already talked about him in our AFC West recap, as well as the first episode. Big topic here in Denver, obviously. You finally have the quarterback. Everybody says the roster is a quarterback away. It's a quarterback away. Now you have the quarterback. You got to go out and prove it. But also got to shore up some of those holes and do our best to make this a roster that can compete in an even stronger AFC West. So you go out and get Randy Gregory to fill up the edge, start to replace Von Miller a little bit there. And then on the defensive line, after losing Shelby Harris, you go and get DJ Jones from the 49ers. Huge pickup there. That should help both the run defense as well as our pass rush as well. And then to replace Bryce Callahan in the slot, you get Quan Williams over from the 49ers as well. Another good young player. Another player from the 49ers, offensive lineman Tom Compton, who's going to compete with another pickup, Billy Turner, as well as some in-house guys for the right tackle spot. And then tight end Eric Tomlinson coming over from the Ravens. He's a blocking guy. He's going to be huge for us in the new running game that Nathaniel Hackett wants to establish here. And really is basically just another smaller tackle out there to help out in that running game. And then you also pick up inside linebacker Alex Singleton from the Eagles. This guy, interesting. He's a special teams ace. It looks like right now, unless the Broncos draft somebody, he looks to be the inside linebacker starter alongside Josie Jewell, who was re-signed by the Broncos this offseason. And Josie Jewell, we know he's got that covered. He started to look really good last year before his injury. Alex Singleton, despite leading the Eagles twice, two separate times in his career over there in Philadelphia so far, I'm a little bit concerned that he looks to be the projected starter, considering he's just in the minutes he's had as a starter. He has not been, blowing anyone away, but he thrives on special teams, which is initially where I thought he would be more utilized with that pickup. So it'll be interesting to see if that's something that the Broncos want to pick up in the draft, which I certainly think that they should. But to get into that a little bit, the Broncos, even though they traded, I think 3 or 4 picks away in the Russell Wilson draft, along with 3 players, they're coming into this draft with 8 different picks. And our very first pick is in the second round at number 64. But we still have 3 different picks in the top 100. So you got a lot of value there. You got a lot of options. You can trade back. You could trade forward. This is the type of draft where a lot of the needs that this roster looks at in terms of offensive line, defensive line, edge players, even cornerbacks a little bit, very deep draft for a lot of those positions. And so something where George Payton, who we know likes to have, he really likes that term. He likes to have a lot of pins to throw at the board. And it's like, he could do anything. And I could very much see him just trying to amass 4th, 5th, 6th round picks and just going ham. And he's like, well, at least a few of them will hit. He has a good and so far so good on his last year. He has a good track record. Had a couple players that he picked late really come out and shine in their first year when they were needed due to injury and things like that. And show some potential out of players that normally you don't expect that out of, coming out of the sixth, seventh, fifth round or whatever it is, at least in their first year. But so a lot of interesting things that they can do. We can take a look at their needs and then some players that I like. First and foremost, right tackle. You do have a few people or a few different players that are going to be competing for that spot. Calvin Anderson in-house, he's been the swing tackle for the last couple of years. And then Billy Turner and Tom Compton, who we talked about in the additions. So you do have three guys that are going to go at it for that. I would still like them to see them add, because I think none of those guys are realistic long-term starters. And for such an important position, I think that should still be one of, if not the highest need for the Denver Broncos. A couple guys I like, you talked about them a little bit earlier. I'm going to try this again, but I'm going to butcher it. Ikem Ekwonu, I'm so sorry, out of NC State. Very, very physical player, ridiculously athletic. He is a joy to watch, honestly. And he's got some things he needs to clean up in the league, but he's one of those players that he's so just ungodly athletic that he can make up for a lot of not necessarily perfect technique things that can get cleaned up over time in the league, but he can still get some success. Another guy I really like that the Broncos have already officially reached out for a visit for, Abraham Lucas out of Washington State. He was a 4-year starter, got a lot of experience. And then Darian Kinnard out of Kentucky is another interesting option. 3-year starter there, very physical guy as well. And then we look at the edge group. David Ojabo is my first pick. Somebody maybe is, when you look at our picks, starting in the second round, you're like, don't know if you can get Ojabo, that late. Might be somebody that you have to trade up into, whether it's the early second or the late first, if he even drops that far. But we've seen stranger things happen on draft day, especially with his Achilles injury. I'll find it really interesting to see if he starts to drop, but I think that there's a lot of different teams that are going to be watching the same thing and want to snag him up a little bit earlier than maybe the Broncos will be willing to. But if they could manage to pick up Ojabo, I think that would be a fantastic first pick of the draft, even if you have to trade up a little bit for him. Another guy I really like, Nick Bonito out of Oklahoma. A lot of energy, plays fast, very interesting guy there. And then Boye Mafe out of Minnesota. He wrecked Auburn a couple times, the college team I root for. So I'm intimately familiar with him, but I would like him a lot more in blue and orange. And then on the inside defensive line, a couple guys I really like. I mentioned Thomas Booker out of Stanford in the Chargers section. Another guy that I think would be great with the Denver Broncos. Super intelligent, loves the game, loves to learn about the game. I can't speak highly enough about Thomas Booker and how much I want him to be a Denver Bronco, but there'll be a lot of teams that want him to be on their team come draft day. So we'll see how far he even makes it in the draft. And even though he's projected to be somebody that could be available for the Denver Broncos, he could go earlier than some people are thinking. And then another guy is Travis Jones out of UConn. Again, maybe somebody that's a little bit too high on the board for the Denver Broncos, but somebody just you can't pass up if there was any chance of getting him. You look at cornerback and then slot cornerback. You did pick up Quan Williams. I believe he's 27 or 28, so he's not getting old yet. He's on a 3-year deal, but again, it's kind of one of those things where with the right tackle position, you have guys in there that you think might be able to fill that position for now, but you would really like to have a long-term solution there. And so for me, a few guys that I really like, Jalen Peter out of Baylor, smaller guy. He specifically plays the slot, and great player. Really interested to see where he lands up. Roger McCreary out of my college team in Auburn. just had to put him on here because I love him being from Auburn. He plays with a lot of energy. He's a leader on the team. He is a tone setter. He's the type of player that recognizes momentum in a game, knows how to shift it, knows when big plays are needed. I think that he's a guy that's going to know his role in the league. And even though he doesn't have like all the flashy physicals, he's not like a physical freak. He's not super clean in terms of his technicality, and he's not, he doesn't wow you in a whole lot of categories. But like I said, he has an eye for the ball. He has, an eye for the momentum of the game, knows the game, is a leader, and knows how to get his guys riled up. And I think that's such an important role on a modern defense, is having that leader, and having that guy to pump everybody up, kind of like a Kareem Jackson, honestly, that we lost. He was that guy that would, a running back catches a pass out in the flat, and you see Kareem Jackson just scream over there and just hit the lights out of him. The entire rest of the defense goes, "Oh, okay, that's how we're playing this game. All right." You know what I mean? So it's like, I would love to see him. I don't even care what team he goes to. I'm going to root for him. I'm excited to see his career, and I hope the best for him. But would be awesome to see him be a Denver Bronco. And then Kyle Gordon out of Washington, somebody who played slot and outside snaps. So versatile guy. I think he's going to be successful in the league as well. And then inside linebacker, somebody I mentioned with the Chargers, both of them actually, Chad Muma out of Wyoming, as well as Brian Asamoah out of Oklahoma. Asamoah is one of my favorite guys in the draft. Just jumps off the tape. And then Channing Tindall is another good option out of Georgia. Super speedy guy, and just flashes all over the field. And then some running back depth. You do talk about losing Melvin Gordon, and you have Javonte Williams, who had a breakout first year. But he's the type of back that breaks a lot of tackles, expends a lot of energy. You had a really good 1-2 punch with Melvin Gordon. And I actually personally thought for the right price, I think it would have been the right move to bring Melvin back, which technically still could happen, but I doubt it. So it would be nice to see them pick somebody up. Kyron Williams out of Notre Dame is an interesting guy. Had 14 touchdowns in his last 8 games in college and just went off.
Damn.
Yeah.
Right.
I was like, geez, I just had to include that in there. And then Tyler, I think it's Algier out of BYU. He's a big bruiser type. That's kind of the role that Melvin, even though Melvin Gordon has a bit of speed and a bit of agility despite his size, he does fill a bit more of that bruiser role. And that was a nice 1-2 punch with Javonte Williams. And then Pierre Strong Jr., somebody I mentioned with the Charger section as well, out of South Dakota State. More of a speedy guy, more of an agility guy, but just a great player, somebody who's going to be successful in the league. And, you get 2 good running backs in a running back room, and good things are going to happen regardless of their play styles together. So, yeah. And is there anything that you would like to add on the Denver Broncos, Enrique?
Yeah, actually. So I love your take on Roger McCreary, because I love him. I love him coming out of Auburn. Leader on the defense for sure. I have an Auburn corner, Bryce Hall. Wait, did Bryce Hall come out of Auburn or Virginia? Sorry, their colors are very, very close, so sometimes I forget. But I think it might be Virginia.
I think it was Virginia. I don't think it was Auburn.
Dang, I fucked that up. Sorry, Bryce Hall. Sorry, Auburn. But no, I love McCreary coming out of Auburn. I think he's one of the better corners. I think he slept on a little bit, but I definitely do think that him and PS2 would make that's a secondary right there in Denver, especially with Justin Simmons back there. Yeah, I love that move. I love Abraham Lucas as a right tackle for the Broncos. If you guys can get him, I think he might be there. I think Ojabo, if if he does drop and you guys are able to maybe sneak back into the end of that first round,
Yeah.
I think that might be enough for it. It's going to be depending on because that edge pairing between him and Randy Gregory, it would be crazy. And
Oh,
then you can give Chubb as and I know Denver Bronco fans love Bradley Chubb, and I'm not really sure why, to be honest with you. He's he's just barely on the field for me, and I'm sorry I have to
yeah.
say it.
No, you're
Just
right
is
though.
barely on the field. So, if you can make Chubb a more rotational piece, I think that fits better for him. At least right now. At least right now. Until I see more. Chad Muma coming from Wyoming. Yeah, if I can shout out Wyoming or Alabama, I definitely will. So, shout out to the University of Wyoming for producing quality football players, and I think
Heck yeah.
I think he's perfect. All you got to do is come down I-25 a little bit, and I think he's a plug and play inside linebacker for the Broncos for sure. And yeah, I mean, I think running back depth is important, especially for the way that Nathaniel Hackett is trying to approach this run game, and I think Javante needs that backup guy just to give him a break. I think I think I agree with your point in regards to Melvin Gordon on going back to the Chargers or coming back to the Broncos. I think either way is a perfect fit for him, depending on if he wants to take a little bit less money. But I also have to give it to him. And I hope he takes a little bit less money so he can get on a team because I do think that Melvin Gordon saw some tread on the tires. But hey, you're a running back, dude, and Melvin Gordon, like you said last week, is low key randomly kind of up there in terms of running back age, because we know that they're one of those positions that kind of falls out of the league a little bit earlier than others. So yeah, I respect Melvin Gordon trying to sit there and kind of get his bag a little bit. But
Yeah.
yeah, I do think it's about time that Melvin signs with somebody, and I think running it back with the Broncos, especially now with Russell Wilson. Yeah, Russell Wilson would be enough for me to want to come back.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, I think this, even though you guys don't have that. What did you guys have before the ninth overall pick?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think even though you guys don't have that ninth overall pick anymore, I still think you guys can definitely make some noise in the draft. And I mean, all I gotta ask is you don't want anybody from Alabama. You don't want nobody from Alabama. Like there's not one Crimson Tide on this whole list. And I'm still relatively, I'm still trying to decide who my college team is going to be officially because I don't have one, man. Like I just don't like college football like that. But I'm starting to get into it a little bit more, especially hanging out with you, and hanging out with some other people that know about some college football like that. It's been interesting. So sooner or later, I'll decide who's going to be my official college football team. But I'm really disappointed that you don't want one of them Crimson Tide boys on the Broncos at all.
Hey, what can I say, man? War Eagle. You just those
I
you can't like until they're on your team. I love Jerry Judy, but until he was a Denver Bronco, I was not going to accept him as a player.
I I guess that's true. I guess that's fair. I'll give you that. I'll give you that. But no, dude, I think you killed it on the Broncos. I think as we keep looking, as we keep getting closer to the draft, like we said with the Jets, we'll start narrowing some of this stuff down. But yeah, dude, especially with the Broncos kind of have without having that first round pick, because everybody loves the first round. I mean, that's the one that's on TV. It's the one. I think this year we're in Vegas, right? So that's the one that's in Vegas. But
Yeah,
it's that second round, that third round, the fourth, fifth, sixth. Those are the guys that really, honestly, build your team. And I mean, you throw enough darts at that board, like you're saying. I mean, Tom Brady literally was a sixth round draft pick, like seventh round
right.
draft pick, sixth, seventh round draft, like yeah. So that's all I gotta
Yeah,
say. Throw enough darts at that board, maybe you end up with a Tom Brady.
exactly. There's value everywhere. And that's the nice thing about drafts like this as well. It's a class that at least coming into the draft, we're looking at as almost a generational class for the amount of talent there is in terms of a few different position groups in the offense or the trenches, really. And then you look at the edges and some linebackers and even a bit of the corners there. Um, and so it's uh, definitely a draft where you can get a ton of value in the later rounds, really get value out of picks that aren't first round picks, because a lot of times you come in there and you're thinking like uh, you have to get this one blue chip player, and that's the one player you tout your draft class on. But drafts like these are really where you can come out with 2, 3, even 4, if you're lucky, starters, even longtime starters. So it'll be interesting to see for all teams involved, but especially for a team like the Broncos, who took the Rams route and traded away that first round pick and now have to try and salvage a draft class out of that. But coming into it with 8 picks is certainly not a bad thing.
Absolutely.
And so for our last section of the day, we're going to go ahead and talk about something that I know you're very passionate about. You got me into it and got me really passionate about it as well. And I'm starting to like it a lot more. And that is the UFC. And on April 9th, next Saturday here, UFC 273 is going to kick off. And how excited are we, Enrique?
Oh, dude, I can't even begin to explain how excited I am. Especially, this is the first UFC pay-per-view that we're covering on the show.
Yep.
I'm so stoked, so happy. I know that
Same.
we do the Jets and the Broncos, and we do the NFL, but obviously, I have a huge passion for combat sports in general, but specifically MMA. And yeah, UFC 273, April 9th, Jacksonville, Florida. Um, Let me tell you, so Jacksonville hooked us up back in 2020 because they allowed the UFC to be the first sport back on TV, to be the first sport kicking something off, and
Yeah.
that was Justin Gaethje, Tony Ferguson.
Oh yeah, we
And
watched
so,
that.
yep, absolutely. And so the fact that the UFC is returning the favor uh, down in Jacksonville again, I just love it. I mean,
Yeah.
the headliner, Alexander Volkanovski, and the Korean Zombie Chan Sung Young. Um, that's a huge fight right then and there. And the whole card. I mean, from the early prelims through the normal prelims to the main card, the whole card has sneaky fights that I'm so stoked. I'm so stoked for this.
Heck yeah, man. Yeah, there's a ton going on. It is a big card with some really exciting fights on it. And like you said, you have some really exciting fights on the surface, but then there's also some of those sneaky good fights that not everybody is necessarily looking forward to. But, come April 9th, they're going to get a show for sure. So to start it off, the big fight that you just alluded to, you have in the featherweight class a title fight between Alexander Volkanovski and Chain Sung Jung, Jesus, the Korean zombie. Sorry, and so first of all, Volkanovski, one of my favorite fighters in the UFC right now, just an absolute force to watch. Has not lost in the UFC at all, and not at all in 9 years in his career, nearly 9 years, I should say. And really exciting fighter to watch, going against the Korean zombie who's worked his way up for a chance at that title fight. Volkanovski certainly a very great opponent to face, but I think the Korean zombie is up to it, and I'm excited to see what he can do. This fight was actually initially going to be against Max Holloway for their third fight, and Volkanovski has won the first 2 of those fights. But unfortunately, Max had to pull out due to injury. So the Korean zombie came in and is going to step up there. And he has won 3 of his last 4 fights but he did that one loss of his four. He lost to Brian Ortega, who Volkanovski beat down in his previous fight in September 2021. So some interesting dynamics going on there, but two really, really good fighters, and I'm really excited to see them battle it out.
Yeah, I think the I love leading out with the headliner as well because I think it's one of the more interesting fights. Alexander Volkanovski, I've seen his come up. Like before he was even a title challenger, he fought the who's who of the division. He fought Jose Aldo, who was the GOAT of the 145 division, uh, beat him, knocked him out. He fought Chad Mendez, and I know you might not be as familiar with Chad Mendez as some of the other guys who have watched the UFC, but Chad Mendez was one of the top guys, and now he's with Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship. He was one of the top guys for just a long, long time, and Volkanovski has worked his way up. He obviously fought Max, took the belt from Max, and then supposedly he won that second fight. I watched that second fight, and I'm a huge Max Holloway fan, so it really does pain me to say that Volk is 2-0 against him. But Max will get that three-peat, and Max will get that belt back. But yeah, Volk fighting the Korean Zombie. I mean, they call him the Korean Zombie, for a specific reason, and that's because that man comes forward and eats shots. Like the Korean Zombie's most dangerous when he's on his feet, and I think that's where the Korean Zombie is going to want to try to keep this fight. He is comfortable mixing it up on the ground. I think the biggest reason why I kind of lean towards Volk in this fight is because I think Volk is the more well-rounded fighter. And if I'm being honest with you, I think Alexander Volkanovski has this spirit of wanting to be a champion. And I know like in other sports, like in the NFL and in the NBA kind of stuff that we cover, it's definitely a team sport, right? So you kind of can rely on other guys to kind of fix your imperfections or cover some of the stuff that you don't excel at. But in fighting, one of the big things that determines a lot of these fights is truly the fighter's mentality going into it. And Alexander Volkanovski does not lack confidence at all.
Yeah,
And if I'm being honest with you, there's a lot of MMA fans got to start putting some respect on Volk's name. I know that he's kind of a little bland in some people's eyes, but I mean he's just an all around solid dude. I mean he came from playing rugby. He was like 240 pounds when he was playing rugby. And he's the champion of the 145-pound division in the UFC. And the UFC,
crazy.
full of killers, full of killers. That fight with Brian Ortega, I mean, damn near was fight of the year. It was definitely round of the year for me. Round three against Brian Ortega was just insane. And shout out to Brian Ortega because he was the last person to beat the Korean Zombie. And yeah, this fight to me really comes down to if the Korean Zombie can put that pressure on Volkanovski that he's good at doing, um, it could pose some problems for Volk. But I think that Volk's overall the more well-rounded fighter, and I think that yeah, he just has that heart of a lion, the heart of a champion. I don't think that Volk's reign's going to end anytime soon, and that's obviously until he fights Max Holloway again, because then unfortunately Volk's back to the back of the line because the best is blessed, baby. The best is blessed.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I totally agree with you. I'm excited for the Korean Zombie to get his chance. But Volk is just a force, and I would be surprised to see him finally go down. But it will be an interesting fight for sure. And then, so to see the co-feature here is a bantamweight title fight, and this one is my personally what I'm looking forward to the most. I believe we watched the first fight of this one as well between
Mhm.
Aljamain Sterling and Peter Yan, and So in their first bout, very, very fun fight for the first few rounds. I believe it was either 3 or 4 that Peter Yan was disqualified due to an illegal knee to the head. And then that would give Aljamain Sterling the belt. And he has not fought since then. So this will be his first fight back. But since then, Peter Yan has actually come back and during they were going to do this matchup with Aljamain, but he had to pull out in October 21. And so he ended up fighting Corey Sandhagen and got the interim belt. So this will be another title fight to finally actually decide the true champion. Aljamain Sterling, in my opinion, in that first fight, he looked like he could have been the one to win it anyways. But you always have that doubt because of the way it ended. You always want to have that kind of cemented, and we could for sure see this end up being a three-peat. I think definitely a fight with a lot of talk about it. But yeah, really excited to see this one kick off.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one because I think it's going to do one or two things. I think that if Aljamain wins, it definitely solidifies him as one of the better fighters in the division. Well, it solidifies him as the champion of the division because there's a lot of fans that look at him right now and don't see him as the champion of the division, and I can relate to that. I'm not saying that I don't. I feel relatively indifferent about him winning the bout that way because it's not his fault. He got kneed in the head illegally,
Right.
and that's the rules, dude. Like, I can't
Yeah.
continue. Like, now I will say that maybe Aljamain, put a little acting, on. But I also didn't get kneed in the head by, Peter Yan, so I don't
Right.
know if
Right.
it was acting. I don't know if it wasn't. But what I will tell you, and we talked about this, shout out to Aljamain Sterling because he literally made a shirt uh like to respond to the haters that say he's a part-time actor. He made a shirt about it, and I love that. I love the confidence from Aljamain Sterling because he hasn't stopped talking since he won the belt. He literally
Nice.
has not stopped talking about getting the rematch and finally finishing Jan off. um so I love the confidence, and I saw pictures of Aljamain Sterling this morning. Ridiculously jacked. I cannot tell you.
Yeah.
I don't know how that man's 135 pounder right now because he's just yoked out of his mind. But in regards to the actual fight, I do think that Peter Yan's probably going to win, and the only reason I say that is because I think Peter Yan is probably the best 135 fighter in the world, and just because the way he's able to put pressure on guys and implement his game plan.
Yeah.
Peter Yan's boxing is just super crispy, super super nice. I want to say that Peter Yan has some of the crispiest boxing in the UFC right now. And obviously MMA boxing is different than true boxing, but if Peter Yan's able to implement his game plan and just keep the fight standing and really put this forward pressure on Aljamain Sterling, I think it could give Aljamain problems. I think that the advantage that Aljamain has is that he's a super solid wrestler, and the gym that he trains at out in the East Coast, with Ally Quinta and all these other guys, they just drill wrestling. Chris Weidman and um, all those guys out there that train with Aljamain. And Aljamain has reached out and trained with Dagestan wrestlers and other guys like that, all in preparation for Peter Yan. So I think that Aljamain is taking this about as serious as he can take it. And that's what I needed from Aljamain, because if Aljamain didn't take it as serious as he did, I would say like that I could probably take a nap during the co-main, because I,
Yeah.
I I I would say that Peter Yan would just run right through him. But the fact that Aljamain has took it so seriously really leads me to believe that this is going to be one of them sleeper sleeper fight of the night type of fights, because I really do think that yeah, this could be something really nice. I think that I still think in the end it'll be Peter Yan. And let me tell you what, if I'm Aljamain Sterling, obviously for his reputation and his status as the champion, I don't want Peter Yan to win, but I think if Peter Yan wins, it's gonna be a real long time before anyone beats him, because Corey Sandhagen is Corey and TJ Dillashaw arguably, the second best in the division, however you want to rank them. But ultimately, like, I don't know if TJ could deal with the strength that Peter Yan has, and obviously we just saw Peter Yan and Corey Sandhagen. Eventually, Peter Yan was able to break him down a little bit, so I think it's gonna be a fun fight regardless, and I'm really excited to finally get this one out of the way. Because if I'm being honest with you, as much as I love the confidence from Aljamain Sterling, I am getting tired of the Instagram posts. Because he can be a little cringy sometimes. He really can be.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I feel that for sure. And it's one of those fights for me where it's like, I'm sure we'll be ready to have it done. But I do look forward to it because I love the UFC fights that have, what feels like at least real drama leading up to it. And they feel like they hit a little bit harder. And not necessarily even like the manufactured, like Conor McGregor drama, where sometimes he's had some real drama going on, and then sometimes he's just stirring up shit to stir up shit, you know.
Right.
But this feels like both of them really want to win it because they're upset about how it ended last time, and there's like genuine passion going into it. So definitely really excited about that fight. I agree with you. Kind of like Volkanovski, Jan is just a force, and it's going to be an uphill battle for Aljamain. But like you said, he's taking it seriously. He really wants to win. It seems like he's really focused on that. And one thing that I loved in the initial fight that, and obviously it's an emotional reaction, but it shows you a lot of where his mindset was at, even initially, right after it happened. And I'm sure his brain's shaking around a little bit at the time, is right after the disqualification and he got named champion, he threw the belt down and he threw it, and it's like, that shows you even he felt that it wasn't how he wanted to win it. And he wants to win it fair and square. He wants to win it by his own merit, and not because Peter Yan disqualified himself. So yeah, very, very excited for that fight. Third fight, however, on the card, or the main card, I should say, is a welterweight fight between Gilbert Burns and then Khamzat Chimaev. And man, this is going to be an interesting one as well, for sure. Burns, always a good watch. But then you have Khamzat Chimaev, who is a combined 14-0 between the UFC and just his overall MMA experience. You know, like, I mean, what can you say? He's just, he wrestles everybody to death. He has a 4-0 UFC record, and all four of those fights so far have ended by a stoppage. And then all four of them have also gotten him a $50,000 performance of the night bonus. So, interesting up and coming fighter, unbeaten so far, and just a scary, scary being, pretty much. But Gilbert Burns is going to get a chance to go against him. He is coming off a win over Wonderboy Stephen Thompson at UFC 264. And then he is also, you talk about Chimaev being a very, very strong grappler, from a long chain of those Russian guys over there that just are ridiculous grapplers and feel like they're way ahead of pretty much everyone else. Like, they're just absurdly good at grappling. But Burns can stack up at least a little bit, as he is a 3-time world champion and a World Cup gold medalist within the grappling realm. So an interesting fight to watch for sure. and whether or not Gilbert Burns can finally take down Kamzat, or if he's just going to continue his reign of terror of the UFC.
Yeah, and to me, this fight and the next fight that we'll talk about, the Mackenzie Dern fight. These two are the most intriguing fights for me, and the reason why the Gilbert Burns Cosma Chimaev fight is so interesting to me is because whenever there's a big hype force in the UFC, they always eventually get to the point where they match them with one of the better guys in the division. And there has not been a hype train like Cosma. Literally, I would probably say since Conor McGregor. Um, this guy, when we were doing the Fight Island stuff, he, was staying the next week and then fighting the next week. Like, he has a 40-second knockout of Gerald Mershaw, which if you haven't seen it, it is it's literally his first punch. He puts the guy out. It's
Yeah,
crazy. And that was when I was very apprehensive of him. I was like, okay, well, he wrestles hella good, but what about the striking? And then
right.
that next fight, he puts Gerald out in his first punch.
Yeah,
So this is finally his big test against someone that, I mean, Gilbert Burns just fought for the belt 2 fights ago, and
yeah,
obviously, he lost to Kamaru Usman by knockout, but it's not that far off. It's not that far off for Gilbert Burns. And I think that a lot of guys in the UFC have been kind of running from Cosma, which is interesting. The only two people that I've ever heard accept a fight or have been willing to accept a fight with this man, Gilbert Burns and Neil Magny. I'm not sure Neil Magny's beef with him because Neil Magny is literally still calling out Cosma to this day, still calls him out. But
dang,
Gilbert Burns is the one that gets the opportunity to kind of stop the hype train. And to me, it's going to be a big matchup of wrestling versus jiu-jitsu. Like you brought up, Gilbert Burns is a wizard in the grappling world, is a wizard in that jiu-jitsu game. And Cosma, he's part of that long-standing, reputation of those crazy Russian dudes that just ground and pound and pick you up and slam you to the ground. In that Habib kind of
yeah,
mold. I think the biggest difference between him and some of the more like Islam Makhachev or Habib is Kazma has really got some hands. He's
yeah,
really, really got some power in his hands, and I think that's the thing that has me worried about Gilbert a little bit, because Gilbert can be kind of susceptible to getting hit with big shots, a la Kamaru Usman. But I think if Gilbert can get him down, and I want to say, especially in like the second and third round, when theoretically people are supposed to be more tired. I don't know how tired Cosmo gets. I've just the legends and stories of him in training camp are just absolutely insane. So if Gilbert's able to kind of play a dirty boxing, kind of get in close with the clinch, take him down, try to grapple him in terms of jujitsu grappling, I think it's going to be great. But yeah, this fight is huge, and it's huge not only just on this card, but for the MMA world in general, because we're finally going to see Cosma against elite competition, because that's what Gilbert Burns is. Gilbert Burns is elite competition. I think he's ranked third or fourth in the whole division, just beat
yeah,
Wonderboy. And I didn't see him getting past Wonderboy at all. So the fact that he was able to is really is honestly very very impressive to me, because I thought Wonderboy was going to stand back, piece him up, but no, Gilbert went in and made the fight his fight. And when you're able to do that against a specialist like Wonderboy, because Wonderboy is usually the one that does that. Wonderboy usually makes anyone fight the way Wonderboy wants them to fight, but Gilbert
right.
Burns did not do that. Gilbert Burns was able to change the pace and kind of make it his type of fight, and won it that way. So yeah, to me, this is definitely the most interesting fight on here, and hopefully it leads up to its its hype and reputation. Because yeah, this one's supposed to be pretty big.
I agree with you. Yeah, I'm very excited to see it. Both guys got a lot to prove. I'm sure Kamzat is very excited to continue to establish his name. And then Gilbert Burns still trying to come back and maybe get another chance at a title fight against Kamaru Usman if he can prove that he can avoid some of those power shots like you were talking about, and um, you know maybe make some adjustments to his game and make a comeback there could be the start of that as well. So very interesting fight to see, very interesting fight to talk about. And then our next fight on the main card, women's strawweight fight between Mackenzie Dern and, sorry, I'm going to butcher it, Tishia Torres. And
Yeah, I think it's Tuesday.
Tisha, that makes sense. So Mackenzie Dern is looking to come back from a decision loss to Marina Rodriguez in October, snapping a 4-win streak, unfortunately for her. Looking to make start come back and build a new win streak there. And then Torres, though, on the other hand, is surging with a 3-win streak after losing 4 in a row. Both coming in at different points in their career. One looking to bounce back and start reestablishing, and then Torres just on a tear at the moment.
Yeah, this is to me this is the second most interesting fight because this is kind of another one of those like a very established veteran kind of going up against a hype force. And
Right.
an excellent point that you brought up is that yeah, they kind of are in two spots of their careers right now. With Tisha Torres, obviously her record 22-10, and depending on how you look at that, you might say that's not a very good record, but Tisha Torres really is uh, an absolutely just perfectly well-rounded fighter. She keeps very light on her feet, kind of keeps moving around the octagon the whole time, and Mackenzie Dern's the opposite. Mackenzie Dern's going to probably be looking to get this fight to the ground and kind of keep it at a slower pace. But Mackenzie Dern's this young up and coming star, and yeah, I love Mackenzie Dern. I love Mackenzie Dern for so many reasons. So many reasons. Besides the fact that she's super hot, she really does come out here and do her thing. She implements her game plan excellently. She's a jiu-jitsu ace. Her dad taught jiu-jitsu for a really long time. And I I feel so terribly bad. Because her dad is relatively famous in the jiu-jitsu world, but his name is just a super blank to me right now. But yeah, I mean, she's literally been doing jiu-jitsu since she was a little girl. So yeah, she's very proficient in it, very proficient in getting to the ground and bending your body to the way she wants it.
Right.
And on the opposite hand, you have Tisha Torres, who is, like I said, is probably going to be looking to keep this fight standing up, just because Mackenzie Dern's striking skills are still developing. She's gotten better striking each one of her fights in the UFC, but they still are very much under development. And Tisha Torres, I think, is going to look to capitalize on that. And even more so, shout out to Tisha Torres because her wife, Raquel Pennington, is also on the card. She's on the prelim card, and she's fighting another up-and-comer, Aspen Ladd. So yeah, I'm
Nice.
sure having your wife on the card with you, and Tisha Torres and Raquel Pennington, both stay out in. I think they stay out in, uh, like kind of the Littleton area, Cherry Creek area. They say they're Colorado natives as well. So,
Very cool.
definitely going to be rooting for the Colorado natives. But I do think that I have to go with my girl Mackenzie Dern. And I think if Mackenzie Dern is able to beat Tisha Torres, it's going to be a very clear sign of where she's at developmentally, with her whole mixed martial arts game coming together. because like I said, coming into the UFC, she was really just known for her jiu-jitsu and being hot. So the fact that she's been able to string some wins together and show people otherwise, and I mean, she's got busted up a few of these fights, and she's been able to hang in there, and she's fought some tough girls. But by far, Tisha Torres is going to be the biggest test for her, and I'm definitely excited to see how this one plays. Anytime I can get like a young potential rising star versus like a savvy veteran, and I can like, because it's the will of two people. It's the will of like the new dog in the house, the young lion that wants to take over the pride. Like I love that. I love that
Yeah.
storyline so much. And especially with two women, it's an even cooler storyline because Mackenzie Dern is really gonna try to come in here and establish and get back on that win streak and snap Tisha's. So I'm excited to see which will is stronger and who's able to implement their game plan better. Because yeah, between the Cosmo fight and the Mackenzie Dern fight, like I'm good on I'm so happy about this card. I just cannot tell you. This card is just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like you said, this whole card seems to be packed, but this one definitely seems like one to watch for, and one that's going to be, tight competition there. And then one other fight here, or I'm sorry, two other fights. The next fight here, heavyweight fight between Jared Vandera and Alexei Olenek. And so this fight was supposed to be rescheduling of a bout with Ilir Latifi, but unfortunately he had to pull out with an illness. And oh, I'm sorry. So he was actually going to be rescheduled once. He had to pull out. So there was a different fight. And then they tried to reschedule it a second time, and he had to pull out this time as well, unfortunately. But we got Vandera and Olenek here, and both of those guys are actually looking to bounce back. As Olenek has lost three straight for the first time in his career, and then Vandera is just 1-3 in his time in the UFC. So not a hot start for him, but maybe he can bounce back against Olenek with a very long MMA record at 59-16-1. But he's 8-7 in the UFC specifically.
Yeah, to me, this fight should be relatively quick. And I only say that because I'm a big believer in Alexei Olenek. If I remember right, the reasons why Alexei has lost his last three is because he's been trying to stand and bang a little bit. Alexei Olenek, that's not his repertoire. He wants to get you to the ground and choke you out. And I think, unfortunately, that's probably what's going to happen with Jared Vandera here. I mean, 59 wins in MMA,
Yeah,
16 losses. That's crazy. That's a crazy
it's,
amount of fight. That's
it's so
so
many.
insane. It's so fucking many. And even more so, if I remember right, I'm pretty sure Alexei Olenek has some sort of UFC submission record. Like he's been able to pull off a certain type of submission more so than anybody else in the UFC.
Oh wow.
And yeah, so Alexei Olenek is a dangerous man. He really, really is. And yeah, I really do think, unfortunately for Jared, he's just a little too green for this one. Plus, I've watched Jesse fight before, and or Jared fight before. I keep calling him Jesse. I'm so sorry. I've watched Jared fight before, and yeah, he's a little slow in regard to striking. I think his best attribute is he can keep up the cardio over 3 rounds as a heavyweight, and I know that kind of sounds like I'm shitting on his fighting skills, but as a heavyweight, that really is a skill that you can bring with you because
Yeah.
you see it with a lot of these bigger guys. I mean, if you go look at the Francis Ngannou's or the Derek Lewis's or guys of this heavyweight stature, they don't always carry the cardio with them to last the
Right.
3 rounds. So when you're getting to that second, that third round, these guys are breathing heavy and they have a hard time swinging, and that's when heavyweight fights get really, really boring. So I'm hoping that Alexi is able to wrap it up relatively quickly. And that's what I do think is going to happen. But if Jared's able to kind of hold on and keep him on his feet, there's a chance that Jared pulls the upset. I think this fight has the opportunity to be one of the bigger upsets of the whole card, unless the Korean Zombie or Aljamain are able to pull off the upset. But yeah, I think the Jared fight might be one of those things that if he's just able to change a few things and stop some takedowns, he might have a chance to really go out there and if I'm being honest with you, I think if Jared loses this fight, he's probably out of the UFC. So I think he
Right.
has a lot riding on this. And then um I mean, the UFC has done some crazy things. I could see them cutting Olynyk too. So this might be the fight of two guys that are on the fringe of their career right now.
Yeah.
Maybe less so on Alexi's part, but yeah, I think that this is definitely going to be one of those more interesting fights. I'm just this card is just this card is stacked. Like when I saw Alexi Olynyk's name on here, I was like, and Alexi's fighting too. I'm a big fan of Alexi just because I've seen him fight so many times at this point that he's a familiar face. You just start rooting for him after a little while.
Yeah.
Plus 59 wins, 59 wins.
Yeah.
That's that's just so crazy. No
Well,
one, like I'm telling you right now, no one in the UFC has anything like that. Like, and please feel free to stat check me. No one is fucking with Alexi Olynyk's record like that. Like, no one's even close. No one's even kind of close.
yeah. No, it's so crazy. Just the amount of fights, let alone the fact that he won most of them. And it's like, it's absurd that his body's still holding up at this point, really. But yeah, that'll be an interesting fight for sure. Unfortunate that we didn't get the initial bout and that Latifi had to pull out there. But interesting to see Vanderaa get a chance, and we'll see what he can do. And then the last fight on the main card is a middleweight fight. I have already butchered too many names today, but I'm going to butcher one more. I believe it
This one's
is.
hard. This one's
It is
hard. I'll give
hard.
you that.
It's.
This one is hard.
I'm going to go with Driku Du Plessis. We're just going to try that versus Kevin Gastelum. And Duplessis, he's coming in on short notice after Nasruddin Imavov pulled out. Gastelum is coming off dropping 5 of his last 6, and his last win was in February of 2021 against Ian Heinisch. But Duplessis is 2-0 in the UFC, and he has finishes in each of his fights so far. So an interesting bout there. I think I'm going to have to root for Duplessis just because his name is so interesting.
Right.
But yeah,
I think so honestly, this is the fight for Kevin Gastelum because I mean you just and granted like Kevin Gastelum has fought monsters like it's not like he's not fighting great grade A competition. Um, Let me see if I can real quickly pull up his last few fights because yeah, I mean he's like he just fought Robert Whitaker. He's fought literally just studs. But I think like besides Ian Heinisch, that's probably the one that I would probably say he had the best opportunity for. Yeah, he just fought Jared Cannonier, who's probably gonna fight Israel Adesanya for the belt. Before that, he fought Robert Whitaker, who just fought Adesanya for the belt. He beat Ian Heinisch. He lost to Jack Hermanson, who is another top 10 guy. He lost to Darren Till, who's another top 10 guy. And then literally he fought Adesanya for the interim belt. The thing that I think honestly has kept Gastelum in the UFC is because he's a tough son of a bitch, dude. Like,
yeah,
and he always comes to fight, but he is a tough son of a bitch. So I think that's going to be the biggest problem that Duplessis has is that you got to get Kelvin Gastelum out of there. But ultimately, this is just, yeah, this is a really scary fight because normally I would go with Gastelum on this one just because I believe that Gastelum has the things that he can win with as far as his wrestling's really strong. He's tough son of a bitch. He can take a punch, and his striking's on par enough. The parts that I start to worry is Duplessis really has knocked out two guys his first two fights in the UFC. I think the biggest disadvantage is that he has taken this fight on last minute. Um, but I mean, what can you do? I applaud every man and woman that's able to step up and save a card. Raquel Pennington is stepping up and saving her fight. And then you have, obviously Duplessis stepping up and saving his fight with Calvin Gastelum. So yeah, I mean, anytime you can step up and save a fight, because otherwise, they're gonna drop a fight from the card. I applaud you for sure, but I'm just hoping that ultimately this ends up working out for him, because I think that, yeah, depending on what Calvin Gastelum is game plan, and that's the other thing, that how do you game plan for somebody that just stepped in a week or 2 weeks before,
Right.
you were supposed to fight someone completely different. So I
It's
think this is
true.
going to be a nice little toss up. And let me tell you what, I'm just definitely glad that I'm not betting on uh on the fights that night, because a lot of these fights can go one or two different ways. Like I can't honestly tell you who's gonna win that Gastelum and Duplessis fight, because I really do think it could go either way. Um, yeah, I want to lean on Calvin, because I just don't want to see him get cut, and I think for sure he gets cut if he loses this fight. I don't know how you. I mean, yeah, I don't know how you don't cut him. I just and I feel so bad for saying that, but it's there's just really no point after that. I mean, he would have lost six in a row. Like, it's really
Yeah.
hard. And the thing about Calvin too is, like, when you see him lose, you feel so bad for him, because he really is an upbeat guy, and his Twitter handle and his Instagram handle are on a mission for gold, and it seems like with every loss he gets further and further away from that. And he's fought the who's who, so it's really, really sad to see him at this point. But I'm glad that he's still going to be able to fight. I'm glad that I still am able to watch him fight, and I'm glad that he's going to be able to, because yeah, these guys, unlike in the NFL and the NBA or these other leagues, these guys get paid when they fight. So if they don't fight, they don't get paid. They don't
Right.
get constant paycheck coming in. So when these guys fight, they get paid, and that's um, that's what I like to see. I like to see guys get paid. But yeah, man, this whole card is just crazy. Real quick, like on the early prelims, I don't really see anything that I'm too excited about besides maybe the Anthony Hernandez Josh Fremd fight. On the preliminary card, you got Jairzinho Rosenstrike and Marcin Tybura, which is going to be a nice little heavyweight fight. But otherwise, the Aspen Ladd Raquel Pennington fight is going to be really nice on the prelims. Mickey Gall is a big name as well, but it's uh, Mickey Gall and Mike Malott is probably going to be a big grappling match, if I'm being honest with you. So yeah, the Aspen Ladd, Raquel Pennington, Jairzinho Rosenstrike, Marcin Tybura on the prelim card, and then the whole main card is just stacked up from top to bottom, especially starting off with the two title fights. Like, with the fact that you can end your night with two title fights, and one of them is going to be Alexander Volkanovski, that's just a solid fight night for you. So I'm stoked for this one, and you already know for sure we're getting together to watch this one, because this is one of those cards that we got to link up for this one. This one's going to be really nice. This one, and then we got to watch our boy Justin Gaethje when he fights Charles Oliveira.
Oh, you know it. You know it. Yeah. No. Never miss a Gaethje fight for sure. But this card absolutely is just absurdly stacked from top to bottom. I'm glad you mentioned some of the prelim fights there. I was actually going to ask you about that. And on the main card, you have fights that have stakes in terms of championships, and you have fights that have stakes in terms of like career trajectory. You know what I mean? Just a lot going on. A lot of interesting fights between the people, but then also, like I mentioned, the stakes behind the people and what it might mean for them depending on the results. So, a very, very interesting card. I'm excited that this was our first one to cover on the show. I'm excited that we got to talk about it, and I cannot wait to watch it with you, Enrique.
Oh, I cannot wait either. And yeah, for sure. I think the plan moving forward is we'll probably just cover some of these bigger, obviously the bigger pay-per-views and the bigger fight nights. But yeah, to start this one out on the show is perfect. You can't ask for a bigger card to start it out for us. So I'm super stoked, and I'm even more excited to watch it with you, my friend, because that's what it's all about, is getting together and watch some good fights, and hopefully I don't know. Now that I'm thinking about it, I kind of want Volk to lose so that way Max can just come in and knock out the Korean Zombie and get that belt back. But
There you go.
I
You're
don't.
thinking outside the box. I like it.
Anything to help my guys. Anything to help my guys. And between Max Holloway and Jesse Gaethje, I don't know who I love more. So anything to help my guys. But yeah, man, I don't know. I guess we'll just have to see what happens next Saturday. Well, at least we'll talk about it after it all happens too. So that'll be nice.
For sure. Can't wait to talk about it on the show with you, my friend. All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been the Mile High Flight Show, and we'll see you guys next week.
Later, guys.